former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Welcome to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. I'm your host, Rich Giardino. Today we have a special. I'm going to discuss some major cases that are pending in the country. A couple of them are right out of New York State, in fact. And then I'll give you an update on where they are, what's next on these cases, and the politics part of it that may or may not be playing a role. We're going to talk about the Kentucky Sheriff who shot a judge first, and then we're going to move on to Shan P. Diddy Colmes, then to Mayor Adams' cases, and then to President Trump's cases. So we'll start right now. For those of you who haven't heard, in Kentucky on September 19th, two friends, a county judge and the sheriff of the same county, who've been friends for years, had lunch together. After lunch, they went back to the judge's chambers, and on videotape, without volume, they had a heated conversation. The sheriff called someone who police believe is his daughter, and then he borrowed the judge's phone and also called his daughter, and she did not pick up. He then pulls a service revolver or service gun, and he shot the judge several times. It's a disturbing video that is online. And it's very interesting. Next thing that happens is the police show up, court officers show up, and the sheriff has the gun on the ground, turns himself in, and he says, "Please treat me fairly." The only other statement he makes, to their recollection, is, "They were trying to kidnap my wife and daughter." And he used the phrase, "they are trying to kidnap her." So very interesting case. Everyone in the small town was shaken by this shooting. A preliminary hearing was held in early October, and the local judge who heard the hearing held the sheriff over for action of a grand jury. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with the criminal justice system, after an individual has been arrested, they have a right to a hearing, a preliminary or the hearing to determine if there's sufficient evidence, or we call it a felony hearing, to hold the defendant over for action by the grand jury. A grand jury is composed of 23 individuals, and at least 12 must vote to indict. So right now, that case is pending, and it's been transferred for action by a grand jury. What's very interesting about this case is everyone in town is shocked because the sheriff had been the bailiff for years for this judge. They had had lunch, seemingly a friendly lunch together earlier in the day, and then moved to chambers. Somebody had heard him say, "We have to discuss this in private" at the lunch. So a lot of details have not come out yet. There's a little side story where the sheriff was in court the Monday before the shooting on an unrelated case where he's being sued for not supervising one of his deputies who was bringing a defendant, a female defendant, into the judge's chambers after hours and having sex with that person under threat of violating them. So violating the terms of their probation. So the sheriff was being sued. So there's a lot of intersecting parts of this story. But what's important for our listeners is to know that the next step of this is whether or not a grand jury will indict. And having seen the disturbing video myself, I can tell you that it's clear that at least 12 people will have to vote to indict. An indictment just shows that there's proof to establish by probable cause that a crime was committed and this defendant may have committed it. From there, a trial schedule will be set up, and at the trial, it'll be to determine guilt or not guilt. If guilt, they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Very cold-blooded murder, very strange circumstances, and it's something that I think people should be following or be aware of, at least if you're interested in crime and the Constitution and politics. Just so you know, every time we show our podcasts, we ask that you like, share, and subscribe on Apple, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, X, and Rumble, and other premium channels. This show to continue needs your support, your subscriptions. The second case we're going to talk about is Sean P. Diddy Colmes. Now, both Sean P. Diddy Colmes' case and Mayor Adams' case have something in common. It was indicted federally by U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York, which is New York City, but it involves other states and several crimes. Let's talk about Sean P. Diddy Colmes. What the feds have a habit of doing recently, and we're seeing an uptick in this, they like to charge racketeering or conspiracy. By charging racketeering or conspiracy, they accomplish a couple things. They extend the statute of limitations. So, for example, in New York, on a regular felony, it's 5 years. On a misdemeanor, it's 2 years. The federal system has different statutes of limitations based upon the crime. For a homicide, there is no statute of limitations. But with Sean P. Diddy Colmes, they've charged racketeering, conspiracy, sexual transporting individuals for purposes of sex, kidnapping, and several other charges. Now, at the same time, there's civil cases pending. The civil cases are for money damage. And the criminal case goes back almost 15 or 20 years and includes all these acts that occurred to various individuals over that time frame. It also includes the disturbing video from 2016 where Sean P. Diddy Colmes is dragging and kicking his girlfriend and drags her by the hair from an elevator that she gets out of down the hallway. Very disturbing. So that's an easy charge because of the videotape. When I say an easy charge, I mean easy to prove that she was defenseless and he was assaulting her. And it's very disturbing as well. And that, again, is available online. So what the feds do with this by going with conspiracy and racketeering is, as I said, they extend the statute of limitations. So in this case, they can also bring in several other cases which bolster the more recent cases. We say bolster, we mean beef them up. So they add corroboration in one sense. So they throw everything at the wall, hope that something sticks. In this case, the side issues are the civil cases I talked about. Now they have 100 plus individuals have filed or are filing sex abuse cases, sex harassment cases, kidnapping, extortion on a civil matter. On a civil matter, it's interesting because what that means is they're suing him for money damages. One suit was filed in the last 6 months for $350 million. When that suit was filed, the very next day, P. Diddy Colmes, through his lawyers, settled that. We don't know for how much, but they settled that case to make it go away. These other cases may not be so lucky. The attorney has very limited statements. He's now got a defense team for the criminal cases and a defense team for the civil cases. One of the things they mentioned is that a lot of this was consensual sex and voluntary. We know right now there's a lot of rumors and innuendo in the media that there's a lot of A-list actors, including young individuals. They're speculating that Justin Bieber, when he was 15, 16, or younger, was abused by Sean P. Diddy Colmes. Those are only accusations. They're not based on any facts that have come out in court yet. But there's a lot of other actors and actresses who attended a lot of his parties that are now regretting that they attended those. So you're going to follow this. We're going to follow this for you on two different levels. The civil cases to determine whether he settles them, whether he pays out on them, and the criminal cases. A conviction on the criminal case involving any of these plaintiffs in the civil case guarantees a settlement in most cases. The standard of proof in the criminal cases is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high standard. In the civil cases, the plaintiffs have to prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence. So think of it 50% plus one. So it's a much lighter, lower standard than a criminal case. In these cases, what the tabloids like, what TV's like is there's sex, money, high-profile stars, and it's taking a guy who's at the top of his game and bringing him down. But one of the things that's disturbing to me as an individual, as a former district attorney, as a former judge and currently a sheriff, is it sounds like a lot of people were involved in these parties, were aware of some of the shenanigans. Some of the accusations include drugging or doping females to then sexually abuse them, videotaping unconsented to sex. A lot of things are going to come out. There have been several raids already. All that material will be tied up in litigation in the criminal cases before it would be available for use in the civil cases. So that's an interesting, fascinating case. What is important to remember is this covers several states and multiple years. And again, by bringing all these together, they're able to use various accusations to support or bolster other accusations. You're listening to the Rich Giardino Show. We're talking about cases in the news, criminal and civil cases in the news. If you like the content of our show, please like, share, and subscribe on Apple, YouTube, X, Facebook, Spotify, Rumble, and other premium podcast networks. The next case we're going to talk about is that of Mayor Eric Adams in New York City. Now, got to give Donald Trump credit, because a year ago, when Mayor Adams started criticizing the Biden administration and the previous sanctuary city for New York, he said it would having the illegal immigrants being shipped into New York will bankrupt New York, will cause an increase in crime, an increase in medical services, an increase in housing costs, diversion of funds that could be spent for any of these for residents of the cities are now being spent on individuals who are in the country illegally. While they may be awaiting a hearing, a lot of people like to say, well, they're legally in the country now. No, but they entered illegally and their hearings are pending. So once Mayor Adams started criticizing the Biden administration, President Trump said he's going to be a target of the Biden administration. They will go after him and they will indict him and charge him. They will find something. Well, Donald Trump appeared to be right, because not only have they indicted the Mayor Adams of New York City, but they've indicted several of his aides, and they're pursuing several other aides around him, deputy mayors, assistants, executive assistants. Several individuals already named or referred to as unindicted co-conspirators have resigned in the administration, and several others have pending resignations or are waiting for the hammer to drop as far as the indictment. And like Sean Diddy Colmes, the U.S. attorneys have extended the prosecution so it's not limited by the statute of limitations, because when you say racketeering and conspiracy, it brings in acts that would normally be outside of a statute of limitations by claiming it's a continuing act, especially racketeering. So what their allegations in a nutshell are that Turkey, the government of Turkey, provided upgrades to trips to hotels and things of that nature for Mayor Adams and his entourage, in exchange for Mayor Adams seeking the code officers and the fire codes to pass a building for the Turkish embassy in New York City before it met all the requirements and the codes. This is dangerous to individuals, obviously, if they use it, but the mayor's attorneys are arguing that, look, the job of a mayor in a major city is to remove hurdles to businesses, to allow people to build, to bring businesses and governments and other users into the cities. And that entails trying to cooperate with foreign governments, with private businesses, to remove building code requirements, not to eliminate them, but to have them expedited and to be sure things are in compliance, but maybe in the future, and push things back. So they're saying anything he did wasn't a quid pro quo, meaning this for that, but was in his responsibility and duties as a mayor. What we note about this case is that They're also tying in his campaign funding and saying that $1 million or more was placed into his campaigns before he was mayor, his other positions by the Turkish government to grease the skids. So when the time came, they could get him to do things to make the Turkish government's life easier. In this particular case, it's weird. They wanted the building approved and open so that when the Turkish representatives of the government came, it was open in New York City, close to the UN, and they perceived the codes as an impediment to them doing that. So it's kind of weird, and it's interesting, as President Trump had said, they're going to get him for speaking out against Biden. Now, what lends credence to President Trump's statements is that he was not invited to a few speeches that President Biden made in New York City, which is very unusual because you would normally invite the sitting mayor, the assemblyman, the senators, and the governor, and noticeably absent was Eric Adams, the mayor. So he's arguing that part of the issue is that they're punishing him for speaking out, and there's some proof of that. So both can coexist at once. He can be committing crimes, and he can also be targeted. The fact that they went back 10 years and have looped everything in supports the theory that it's politically motivated and they were looking for anything they could use to get to the mayor. There have been calls at different levels from different individuals that the mayor should resign. The governor was a little bit iffy on it. She hasn't come directly out as of the date of this taping, but it shows you the political pressure. That's going to open up a whole variety of things. Andrew Cuomo, who left the governorship in disgrace, resigned, has put out feelers that he's seeking or interested in seeking the mayor's job if Eric Adams is removed. There was a poll done by Olson Strategies, Olson Pollsters, several months ago, almost a year ago, that said Andrew Cuomo could beat Eric Adams if the mayoral race was held back then. So this is something that's been on the radar of a lot of politicians and pollsters and people who watch this stuff for a while. It's really being driven by the small group of supporters and staff around Andrew Cuomo so that his name gets pushed to the forefront, gets in the newspapers, gets on TV, and people start chatter. The chatter starts about whether he would be or should be the next mayor. So that's going to be interesting to follow. If he runs and loses, that'll open up some doors. The other name that's being tossed around is Jumaane Williams, who is a borough president, but also Tish James, the attorney general of the state of New York. If Tish James throws her hat in the ring, she got high popularity, high numbers in New York City, and Andrew Cuomo does, it would be a battle between the accused and the accuser. Tish James accused him and pushed forward, and Andrew was in the target. So it'll be a very fascinating and I would imagine dirty race if the mayor does resign. And if Tish James does run against Andrew Cuomo, the field may be crowded with others, but those will be the two biggest names in the field, and those will be the two with the most dirt to throw at each other. So it'll be interesting. You have to remember, after the Attorney General won re-election last year, or the year before, it came out that her chief of staff had been accused of sexual harassment. So it's going to be difficult for her to point the finger at Andrew Cuomo for sexual harassment and cover up when her office has been accused of covering up sexual harassment by her chief of staff. So that'll be a fascinating race. If Tish James wins the Democratic primary and the mayoral race, that's going to open up the Attorney General's office in the state, and you'll see a lot of high-profile names bantered about who could seek that position. The last time the Republican candidate came within 6 or 7 percentage points of winning the Attorney General's race, and that was before all this other stuff came up about the Attorney General covering up accusations against her chief of staff. Just as a reminder, if you like what you're hearing, please like, share, subscribe. to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet, on Apple, X, Spotify, on YouTube, on Facebook, on other premium quality podcast platforms, and keep the conversation going. We'll wrap up with our final portion is about President Donald Trump. Something recently happened that's very interesting. After the Supreme Court decision a couple months ago that said you can only be indicted on acts that are personal and not in your authority as the president, then they reopened up the investigation. The attorney has been going through trying to see what has to be stricken from the record and what doesn't. And in a very highly unusual move, the day after the vice presidential debate, the federal judge in this case, released the pleadings. Pleadings are what the accusations are, the motions and the counter motions and the responses, and outlined all these things that President Trump supposedly did on January 6th or the day before or the day after to show that he was an insurrectionist and he was driving the riots or the protest that became a riot and the criminal mischief and damaging the Capitol. And so what they did was they released all these acts from the motion papers. They got out into the mainstream media to further hinder or attack President Trump. There's a time and a place for those. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the Attorney General of the country has always had a policy not to release anything within a certain time frame of the election so that they do not impact on an election on all levels if it's a federal investigation. By making a motion and application that the judge release it and the judge releasing it, they have violated their own rules. And when they had Hillary Clinton running and the FBI director released last minute some of the accusations, whether they were founded or unfounded, it was done in a manner that brought broad condemnation. Adam Schiff was a congressman in California, recently said, the public has to know about Donald Trump, but he condemned the FBI director and the U.S. Attorney's Office of allowing the Hillary Clinton information to come out within weeks of the election. So I guess it depends on, whose ox is being gored or who you support, whether you're offended by the release that shouldn't have been released or whether you think it was a good thing. So Adam Schiff is just one example of that. So again, we'll be watching what happens with that federal case. We're still waiting on the case down in Georgia, where the state's attorney had her boyfriend recused as a special prosecutor, and now they're reviewing everything there on several different grounds. One is on the Supreme Court case about what the president's immune from and what he's liable for, and that was in the taking confidential records, where another federal prosecutor said, well, Joe Biden did the same thing. Joe Biden is a sympathetic figure. He's elderly. He's confused. So we're not going to charge him. He didn't say he didn't do it. He said they're not going to charge him, although there's sufficient evidence to show that he took confidential information, it's top secret stuff, over years. And some of it was used in a book. And the author destroyed a lot of the stuff he had, which would really further raise red flags. But apparently, again, it depends on whose ox is being gored and if you're upset or not upset, or if you want to dirty the opponents. So that's how politics is infiltrated, and lawfare has permeated our criminal justice system, our local states prosecutors, and also the federal government. There's so much to show that things aren't being handled on an even keel, that there's an argument that they're being handled honestly in a way directed to affect the outcome of elections and to attack one candidate as opposed to others. This has been a special edition of the Rich Giardino Show. Where Constitution, crime, and politics meet. We've been discussing major cases in the news, where they are now, what they mean in the future. I ask you to please like, share, and subscribe to the Rich Giardino Show on YouTube, on X, on Spotify, on Facebook, on Apple, and all other premium platforms that show excellent podcasts and ours. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this enlightening and educational. This is Rich Giardino. Until next time, please remember to thank a police officer, a probation officer, a parole officer, a dispatcher, a corrections officer, EMS, or other public safety worker who every day are out there serving the public, saving lives, and making things better in this country. Thank you.
Like and subscribe to The Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on The Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.